If you remember some patches ago, Bandai Namco gave Gotenks a second version of his 5L, 6L. So usually 5L is a pretty stubby normal, but if you hold forward while pressing 5L, you get a lot more range to it. There is, however, a noticeable difference in startup. The normal 5L version is 6-frame startup, while the 6L is 9-frame startup. I suspect that Bandai didn't like this difference between the two versions, namely just the fact that, if you're pressing with a 6L that's 3 frames slower than the 5L, why then use it in your pressure sequences if it means that you're not going to be able to fully keep the opponent locked down in certain situations or be able to chase them? So they sped up the startup. So now it's 6-frame startup, just like his 5LL, basically meaning that he has two versions. A stubby version, and one with a little more range to it that you would like to use to make sure you can set up for some anti-reflect proof strings, no doubt. There's a number of buffs to Gotenks' third attack of his light auto combo, so let's go ahead and start breaking them down piece by piece. First, let's take a look at the old startup of the move. It used to be a 10-frame startup option. Additionally, this used to be the delay on whiff. About 72 frames of delay. So this also means that on whiff, it would come out a little bit slower. So all those things considered, it wasn't really a great option to mash out in neutral too often, I would say, but it was something that you could at least try to cover a lot of the screen with. Definitely not as effective as some other normals, though. As for the buffs, let's get into them. The startup has been decreased by 2 frames. So now it's a frame 8 option for Gotenks to throw out. Additionally, they reduced the delay on whiff, and they sped up the timing on whiff as well. So now it goes pretty fast, and it's only negative 52 on whiff as opposed to negative 72. So 20 frames less of recovery. This pretty much probably makes it a pretty viable option to mash out once you have these half-screen ranges. And don't forget, with the buff to 6L, basically means that, Gotenks has a pretty decent option to try and surprise the opponent here. Although I still don't think that's what you're going to want to do with the character. I mean, you got to press all these normals, and to swing with something that's like 34 frame startup in a game where other normals are reaching that space on screen in like 24 frames or something like that. So I don't really see the utility of it outside of like being able to deal with some of the opponent's reflect proof options, especially in a world where perfect reflect is a thing. But even then, I don't really see how that utility is really going to be a vast improvement over what Gotenks had previously. Still, it is a buff, I suppose. The next change to explore is Gotenks' Ki Blast attacks. Previously, he only fired 4 Ki Blasts, which is a little bit below average, actually. Generally, this just means that he couldn't use as many Ki Blasts in terms of his pressure sequencing if he chose to shoot out several of them. His neutral non-committal zoning game was a little bit more limited compared to other castmates who just had more Ki Blasts that they could fire and potentially lock the opponent down for longer, baiting them into a super dash. And it also means that in combo routing, he could only fit in 4 of these, which would build about out a quarter of the bar, as we can see in the example here. Now let's see how many Ki Blasts Gotenks could shoot in the new patch. 6, so this pretty much brings him up to average with most of the other Ki Blast firers in the game. He's kind of right in that 6 sweet spot, as it were. And it also means he's able to build up just that little bit of extra meter. So his zoning is a little bit better because he's able to lock the opponent down at full screen just a little bit longer, maybe bait out a few more super dashes with this option. If he's able to use these in combos, he has the opportunity to fling in 2 extra hits of damage to build a little bit of extra bar. Curious to see what the application is. I feel like most of this is just normalizing him compared to the rest of the cast in their Ki Blast game. The next change has to do with Gotenks' medium auto combo and the great special rolling kick version that comes out during that. Previously, there really wasn't much to work with here. The opponent would be knocked pretty close to Gotenks before, and in the corner, there wasn't a wall bounce or anything like that for Gotenks to function with. So what about the new behaviors of the medium auto combo's great special rolling kick? Well, the opponent's knockback has been adjusted, and there's been an increase in the hit stun time. As you can see, the opponent kind of spins closer to Gotenks for a long period of time. In the corner, you do get a wall bounce for a potential side swap, and if you back down, you're able to then get a 2M link. In mid-screen, you can actually run up and link a normal. Most of my success has been using 6L. I've had difficulty trying to get 2M to work. Not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying I've had difficulty. And of course, if you do the 5L confirm, well, it does seem a little tricky to convert off of after that. I think you're going to have to settle for a jump normal here. Etc., of course. Let's see if there's any sort of applications with this new medium auto combo in terms of a more optimized combo routing. The medium version of Great Special Rolling Kick has two very important buffs to it that have a lot of implications for Gotenks' neutral. The first thing to note with his behavior is that while this move was key blasting you, as you can see with the invincibility properties, it wasn't able to actually beat out some other aerial options, most notably Super Dash. So basically, Gotenks, if he ever tried to spin around like this in air, it was sort of like a signal to the enemy for, now I should Super Dash at you because you're stuck in this animation and I could potentially get a punish. The other change to note is going to be to its clash level, where previously this was a normal that had light priority scaling, so while it would clash with light normals, any sort of medium or heavy normal would be able to beat it cleanly. So what are the two changes to Great Special Rolling Kick's medium version? The first change is that the move now has anti-air frames. So it's able to actually beat in jumping attacks. This also includes Super Dash. So if we were to set up a test again, Gotenks can now react to these Super Dashes and just blow them up pretty cleanly. In some instances, with the right routing, leading into full combos off of this starter. Or if the opponent sees that he's spinning and tries to Super Dash in, well, they run the risk of actually getting caught by this move, so they need to wait for the move to actually end in order to make that approach against Gotenks. This also has implications in some matchups where the opponent could represent a strong air-to-air option move, and Gotenks now actually threatens an anti-air attack in order to deal with the opponent. An anti-air attack that cancels another special. So that's kind of terrifying to think about. Just in terms of how scary Gotenks is to fight in the air. They did also increase the clash level, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to find an example currently of what that looks like. As you can see here, it's not like I'm suddenly clashing with a grounded medium normal here. I imagine this has something to do with like air-to-air interactions, but that's hard to test considering that the move now also just has anti-air frames to it. Maybe this is something to make sure it doesn't clash with Super Dash and won't beat it cleanly. Maybe it means that it's not going to clash with a jump air normal of some kind. If anyone out there who's done a little bit more testing can elaborate on this in the comments, do let us know. The next change to discuss is to Galactic Donut's block stun. Previously, Gotenks was +5 on block, which meant that he basically got to retake his turn. However, if the opponent chose to jump out, his options to catch a jump were a bit limited. 2M, for example, was too slow to even catch. However, you could easily catch these jumps with 5L, 2L, or with 5M if you were quick enough. Sometimes you could miss. And if you're a bit slow on these more rewarding frame traps, well, and if the opponent chose to jump, you could be in a bit of trouble here for Gotenks. It was a nice pressure reset tool, but Gotenks' options were a little bit limited. And probably most importantly for this situation, it also meant that if the opponent tried to input reflect, they'd usually be able to get it out. So Gotenks really couldn't true string any of this pressure. So there was always that reflect RPS mind game that Gotenks would have to play after using Galactic Donuts to lock the opponent down. Now let's look at the new block stun on Galactic Donuts. It's been increased by 10, so instead of being +5, Gotenks is now +15, and this has quite a few implications to it. For starters, if we try to do some of the old stress tests that we did earlier with the opponent, obviously, they can no longer jump out of this because I'm just true stringing. Which might seem like a bit of a nerf against a jump out option. But it also means that Gotenks can threaten with some of his longer range normals and still true string in some cases. Or at the very least, run up and get his pressure. And then catch the jump. Additionally, this also is here to prevent the opponent from just getting out of reflect in some instances. If you're mashing reflect there, because this is a true block string, you don't actually get reflect. The game will read you as standing, and you'll get opened up low, and I've seen this happen in some tournament footage since the patch has dropped. I think that this is the main reason why they buffed this, because now that Perfect Reflect is in the game, they want to make sure that Gotenks players don't get overly punished with their Galactic Donuts pressure, because previously you were playing Reflect RPS, and now with the extra 4 frames of advantage the opponent could get from Reflect, it could mean that if Gotenks is wrong in this circumstance, he was going to get exploded, but now it should mean that Gotenks never really has to worry about it. He can just sort of true string the opponent low, and who knows what kind of crazy solo mix-up shenanigans he can get into, or what he can create by using this to lock the opponent down and then string it into an assist. There's a lot of implications and potential use cases here that should be explored. Die Missile Barrage has a couple of buffs to it that greatly increase Gotenks' combo potential. So before, if we look at the move itself, we have to look at the opponent's hit stop as well as the knockback on hit. There really wasn't a whole lot to work with here. Now, obviously, Gotenks could pick up confirms with this pretty easily. Various special moves combo, for example. So it's not like Gotenks was really struggling to use this move in those situations. But there are some new things that you can do thanks to the buffs, which we'll get into now. So now let's take a look at the new Die Missile Barrage's knockback and hit stun. As you can see, the opponent will actually be bounced off of the ground, and with the right circumstances, you'll be able to actually combo off of this. Most of the combo examples I've seen use the corner, as you can see right there, but there's tons of mid-screen applications for this, and this does a lot to help Gotenks' finicky combo route structure. Courtesy of aka Snoopy on Twitter, we've been able to see that usually when Gotenks does like some of his mid-screen routing, he would have to do some finicky shout cancel links, but now with the new Die Missile Barrage hit stun, Gotenks is getting a little bit of extra damage, meter build, as well as easier combo pickups because of this change. You can spin him down, Die Missile, get the bounce, and then seamlessly pick things up. This is a huge quality of life buff for Gotenks, just making his combo routes more rewarding as well as simpler to execute. In addition to the fact that you get to preserve your smash launcher in this situation too. This is a pretty big buff for Gotenks' combo theory, and there are a couple of other examples to explore as well. If you look at the hashtag, you can see the cool kid looking into some other tech with Gotenks, so I highly recommend that you check out anything the cool kid is working on, including like a Galactic Donut mix, some hit confirms and whatnot. TJ Nova showcasing other combo routes that you can do as well thanks to the Die Missile Barrage change. You can even do some loops like this in mid-screen.
Can't you do any better?
And again, we actually get to see the multi-new key blast coming into effect here. So again, we're not sure if this is going to be the optimal stuff with Gotenks, but you rest assured, like if you had trouble doing some shout cancel loops in mid-screen before, the Die Missile buff is basically going to completely alleviate that while giving you more meter and rewards for it. This is a really big buff for Gotenks. The next change to look at is Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack, the heavy special version that leads to the infamous Ghost Oki. Previously, you would trigger the ghost with negative edge. So if you press the button and released it, you would send the ghost flying, or the ghost would all fly at a specific point. Basically, because of this forced negative edge design, Gotenks players would have to come up with specific button order presses or have to figure out ways to hold down certain buttons to delay the releasing of particular ghosts. It was a very technical process that players would have to engage in order to release specific ghosts at specific timings in order to actually pilot and use the Ghost Oki incredibly effectively. And this was a difficult skill to learn, especially if you were a pad player, since you generally had to rely on a single digit, your thumb, to press all of your face buttons, as opposed to like a hitbox player or an arcade stick player that had a finger that could at least hold down any of those button presses and then release it in order to trigger the ghost. It seems that Bandai Namco wanted to try and alleviate the difficulty in execution between these peripherals, or just alleviate the difficulty in execution altogether with the change that they made to this version of Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack. So the change to Ghost Oki, as we'll call it, is a little bit controversial because they basically have added a way to get around negative edge. If you hold back while you press any button and you release it, the ghost will not fire. However, if you don't hold back, then the ghost will still fire as well. But again, if you hold back, it basically disables the negative edge response from the ghost. And now, On paper, at a first glance, you might think, well, this removes like the skill of Ghost Oki, because now you can simply just choose when you release the ghost by, releasing your back input and then pressing the normal or releasing the normal. Because one important thing to note here, I'm gonna hold back, press heavy. I'm still holding heavy. If I release back and then release heavy, the ghost will still fly out. But if I hold back, release heavy first, then the ghost stays in place. And even if I release back, the ghost will stay in place. So this adds a whole nother layer of like nuance to your Ghost Oki, which primarily will affect your safe jumps. Because think of the concept here, right? If you're doing Ghost Oki and I'm doing a safe jump and I'm holding down back after this jump heavy, I've released jump heavy ages ago. That ghost never flew out. So instead of me having to release that button, I also have to release my block input in order to send that ghost forward. Something like this. And even then, if I release the button first and then do my block later, that ghost won't come out. So all of a sudden, like these safe jump setups, they're much harder to execute and a lot less safe in order for you to do so. You can't just hold back while you do this option. Like I have to do something like this, where I'm sending my ghost in probably earlier than I want to in order to block later to prevent the ghost from being released. There's a whole new level of weirdness here that's definitely going to affect Ghost Oki muscle memory for a lot of players. But there are some ways that are already around this that we've been able to discover thanks to the likes of players labbing and posting on social media. Courtesy of Brave_CG on Twitter, this is an example of being able to do a meaty safe jump moon jump using the new properties of Ghost Oki in this patch. So we're going to see the very simple knockdown setup to get things running. Moon jump, and then you're able to go empty low here. Or delay air dash high, and you still have a ghost left over. And keep in mind, this is a safe jump. And the instructions are right here. You hold light and special to release the S for the meaty. You moon jump, release immediately heavy, and then you release the light. And then you get a full block string, four-frame reversal, anti-vanish block string here. So it is a little difficult and complex, but it is still something that you can certainly do. And you might have to explore some other Ghost Tech options in this situation. It is frustrating that Bandai continually messes with Ghost Oki and how it functions, like each and every other patch it feels like. But we'll see how overall this is going to affect things. I think the idea was to maybe boost the creativity that you can get by just making it easier for everyone to negative edge the ghost. But the interaction it has with the safe jump specifically make it a little more difficult. There is some things that you can do, obviously, like this moon jump high-low mix-up does seem pretty strong. We'll just have to see how it goes from here. The last Gotenks change to look at is to his A assist. Previously, it was a 44-frame startup move that had 46 frames of lockdown, which was pretty good, especially for a move that had a little bit of tracking to it. But of course, it wouldn't really follow the opponent after they moved around. So you generally didn't really see this assist used too often unless you were playing with like an old school Season 1 Gotenks player that just had a fondness for this assist, or they wanted to use a heavy block stun assist for a particular mix-ups. Right? Giving you some ideas here. And just like the Galactic Donuts buff that we saw earlier, there's also a 10-frame increase in the block stun and the Galactic Donuts A assist. 56 frames is pretty high. To usually get a block stun of this level, you generally had to go for a C assist of some kind. But now you have that on an A assist cooldown with Gotenks here. And that opens up, potential mix-ups for a whole lot of cast members that could be true. So if you're interested in having a character or team composition that needs a high block stun assist to run like a true left-right high-low 50-50 mix-up against the opponent, Galactic Donuts looks like a pretty damn good choice, and there's certainly a lot to explore with it. Pretty much every change that Gotenks got in this patch was a buff that he'll greatly appreciate, outside of maybe some of the finickiness that is introduced with the Super Ghost Kamikaze attack change. I could see people being like, man, they took out all the skill of this move because now you can do things differently. But I think things just might be a little more complex because of the fact that, you can't just hold down back and release the ghost all the same. You actually have to release your block input to send the ghost flying forward. So maybe that complicates things a little bit. Still, he appreciates pretty much everything else he gets in here. While I don't think the auto combo changes are anything great, the fact that his advancing 6L is also a 6-frame normal is a really good change for him to just reliably be able to poke that normal out and have it be as fast as possible, especially at point blank ranges, is really good. 5S is a nice buff to his neutral. The great special rolling kick changes both to the medium auto combo version and into the medium version with the anti-air property is massive for his neutral, actually. That one's probably the second biggest change of the patch. It's either the first biggest or the second biggest, depends on where you rate the Die Missile Barrage change. The fact that his combo routes got a little less finicky in terms of your cancel windows, and that you're able to add in more damage and more key gauge for Gotenks makes him an even better battery source for the team. Low-key, I think Gotenks is a bit underrated in the previous patch, and I still think he might be just a bit underrated in this patch. He was already a scary character before, in my opinion. People just don't play the character because he's got some stubby normals, and there's some characters that do some things a little bit better than he does, and you have to invest to be able to pilot the Ghost Okazemi pretty well. But now, honestly, I kind of feel like he's fighting for a top amongst the upper echelon of the cast right now. There's just a lot of things that he does that I think a lot of cast members would love to be able to do. He's just packaged in this shrimpy little kid's body. And, maybe you're not into that aesthetic or vibe when it comes to playing your character. But I think that Gotenks is quite a strong character and is definitely worth considering to play on your team competitively in this patch.